So I'm going to talk about asthma for a little while. So if you're here for sleep apnea and snoring, never had asthma in your life, hang in there. And if you can follow the asthma story, you'll be able to follow better the sleep apnea story, because the way we've been treating asthmatics in Australia for the last 30 years with our fantastic record, I don't think so, is the way we're going down the same path with people with sleep apnea and snoring. If you can understand one, you'll understand the other. So, asthma. Now, often when we talk about asthma, we focus on these triggers. It's the cat, it's the dust, it's the pollen, it's the perfume, or whatever. But all these things are just chemicals that get into our bloodstream, or it's the exercise. They're just things that make you breathe more, because when these chemicals get into your bloodstream, what happens is they put your system under pressure, because they react with your body chemistry in some way. And we're all genetically different. I actually didn't like cats and dust, but I quite like perfume. We're all a bit different. And these chemicals react in such a way that puts your system under physical pressure. And whenever we're under pressure, either physical or emotional for that matter, our body goes into defence mode. And our heart rate increases and our breathing increases. The two things always go together. So these things just make you breathe more. Now that's okay. But if you happen to be an over-breather with low levels of carbon dioxide, you come in contact with something that makes you breathe more, and that puts you into the danger zone. Your body's not getting oxygen, so your body reacts. Now, for people who have asthma, basically all people with asthma are over-breathers. This number, 14 litres per minute, comes from the 40 people in Brisbane. It comes from the 600 people in the UK. Every asthmatic is an over-breather. Now, sure, if you get asthma or hay fever, you may be born with a propensity for asthma. Some people are born with a propensity to asthma, some people don't get asthma, but they get something else. They might get sleep apnea, they might get something else. Let me tell you this, if you over-breathe, breathe incorrectly, and your body's not getting oxygen, and it gets to the stage where your body's critically not getting oxygen, your body will self-correct in one of four ways. It'll either squeeze up your nasal passages, giving you nasal conditions and sinus conditions. It'll squeeze your bronchial tubes, giving you asthma. It'll squeeze your throat at night, stopping your breathing with apnea perhaps. Or it'll squeeze up your whole throat and mouth, giving you anaphylaxis. Or it'll wake you up and disturb your sleep, trying to stop you from breathing like that. They're all treated in the same way, with dilation, drugs or machines or drugs to stop your body's response without addressing the cause. So the person with asthma is an over-breather. When you breathe too much, you've got low levels of carbon dioxide. Your body's not getting the right amounts of oxygen. But at the moment, I might be okay. I've got drugs in me, I'm okay, right? But suddenly I'm triggered by coming in contact with something that makes me breathe even more, or I run. And when it makes you breathe more, it pushes you in the critical stage, and then you have an asthma attack. What happens is the smooth muscle wrapped around the bronchial tube. Now, that's another thing you can look up if you want. A smooth muscle, involuntary muscle. I haven't got time to go into it today, but this is why this affects so many other conditions in our body. The smooth muscle squeezes around the bronchial tube on the asthmatic, and they can't breathe. So what does the asthmatic do then? Try harder to breathe, of course, and pretty soon we're... And whenever we're breathing heavily and hard like that through our mouth, we're not very far away from needing a puff of our Ventolin or our Bricanol, our reliever medication. So we take a puff, and at first it's fantastic. The drug chemically relaxes the smooth muscle and the bronchial tubes dilate, open up, and the asthmatic can breathe. But pretty soon we find we need 2 puffs or 3 puffs or 4 puffs or more and more and more. Well, the problem with this form of symptomatic treatment is that you need to understand how all these reliever drugs are based. All these blue reliever drugs here, they're all known as adrenal. They're all basically adrenal. They're all based on adrenaline. And everyone knows what adrenaline does to you. Adrenaline makes your heart rate increase and causes you to breathe more. The two things always go together. It's the hormone that surges through our body. It's our body's most basic form of defence. Whenever we're excited, whenever we're nervous, whenever we get a fright, whenever we have to act, or whenever we're even sick a little bit, our heart rate increases and our breathing increases. But hang on, I just said the cause of asthma in the first place is that you breathe too much. Could it be the very drugs that give you relief have a major side effect of keeping you breathing too much or making you breathe more? And thus you need more and more and more. And this was highly suspected all around the world where these drugs were out for 10 years or more, the death rates went like this. And so clinical trials were done to prove this. And the main ones were done in Canada and New Zealand. And what they tested was, would taking just 3 puffs a day of a short-acting bronchodilator, Ventolin, would it make the person's asthma get better, remain the same, or get worse and they needed more and more and more? And the overwhelming evidence was that these people needed more and more. And all this bad press came out about the asthma drugs. Ventolin puffers harmful. Are asthma drugs a cure that kills? Another headline reads. Wrong approach comes under an asthma attack. Ha ha ha. Asthma sufferers often careless. Asthma sufferers victims of indifference. Asthma worse in teen girls. All this bad press came out about the asthma drugs. So in Australia and the UK, the national asthma campaigns were formed. This was media. If you need 3 or 4 puffs a week, go back to your doctor who's supposed to know about all this research. And the doctor would then prescribe for you, if you needed this much, preventer medication. And what the preventer medication should happen is that if you've got any asthma symptoms where you need 3 or 4 puffs of this stuff a week, you should be on preventer medication all the time. And what the preventer medication does is it sits in your lungs and it reduces inflammation in the lungs, one of the vital symptoms of asthma. So you have an asthma attack, and if you've got preventer in you, it's not as bad. And so you don't need as much of this reliever stuff. That's the theory, which is going to make you worse. So, just to explain, the BIBH, Buteyko Institute of Breathing and Health, the professional body that controls us, the practitioners, what our approach is to medications if you do the Buteyko course with me. Well, you stay on whatever medications you're prescribed by your doctor. But when it comes to asthma drugs, the world's best practice is this. The people should take their preventer medications all the time as prescribed by their doctor, but you should only ever take reliever drugs only for relief. But many people don't take their drugs that way, only when you need them. Many people take them several times a day, whether they've got it or not, because they think they're stopping it come. In the short term it will, but inadvertently, long term, it'll weaken you because of the side effect, and require more and more and more. Many people take a puff of this drug before they take the preventer, because the theory is this will open up their air tube so the preventer will get in. How ridiculous is that? Some packets even tell you to do that. Many people don't understand. Many people tend to overuse these drugs, okay? And what compounds all this is if you can go to a chemist in Australia and buy Buteyko or Ventolin over the counter, without a prescription, thus encouraging the overuse of these reliever drugs. Now, what other countries can you do? It's Australia, New Zealand, certain Asian countries. Guess which countries have the highest incident or death rates in the world from asthma? Same countries. What a coincidence. Now, look, I'm not bagging people who do that. I used to do it myself. We think we're stopping the asthma response coming in the short term, but long term, we're making us weaker and weaker. And many people don't just understand it. I was talking to my barber in Moonee Ponds. You might not think he's such a good barber, but I don't think he's too bad, Anyway, last year, he was cutting my hair. And I said to him, do you get any asthma or hay fever? He says, yes, Brian. He said, I got her the blue one, I got the green one. He said, I don't take the green one, it doesn't work. Now, I'm not bagging for not understanding the way these drugs are supposed to work. Many people are like that, okay? Now, what happens is we tend to overuse these drugs, inadvertently making us worse. Now, very quickly, Qvar, Flixotide, Pulmicort, Alvesco, inhaled corticosteroids, a synthetic version of our body's natural hormone cortisone. Should be taken regularly all the time if you have any asthma symptoms. Prednisolone is the stronger version, the tablet form that goes through the whole body, and this is if you have a more severe condition or you come out of hospital. You have to step down through prednisolone. Intel, Tylade, and Singulair, and a few others are non-steroid anti-inflammatory drugs. Often people go on these if they don't like the steroid word. It's a little bit, they don't work as well, and a little bit misguided because these steroids actually are quite good for people with respiratory conditions. Ventolin, Buteyko, Asmol, Aramir, basically the same drug, salbutamol, just different brand names. Buteyko slightly different. Short-acting bronchodilators designed to chemically open up your airways for up to 4 hours. Atrovent and Spiriva, the tablet form of Atrovent, the Spiriva, usually prescribed for people with bronchiectasis, emphysema, to soak up mucus as well as open up the airways. The nebulizer is the pump delivering large volumes of Atrovent mixed with Ventolin often. Not used much anymore, sadly still with children, mainly because of these new drugs, Ceravent and Oxys. Ceravent and Oxys are called controllers. 1 puff of Ceravent or Oxys is equivalent to between 8 to 12 puffs of Ventolin. This drug is called salbutamol. This drug is called salmeterol. Mega. Same drug, much stronger. So they know these drugs are very strong. So they insist that people be on preventer at the same time. But sometimes people don't take their drugs regularly. Sometimes people can't be trusted to take people. Sometimes people don't understand. So the medical authorities, in league with the drug companies, have come up with this new type of medication called combination. Seretide from GlaxoSmith and Symbicort from AstraZeneca. And you could be on either one of those. And people, asthmatics have been put on this in their thousands and thousands in Australia. And I've written them in the 2 colours because Seretide contains very, very, very strong Ventolin reliever as well as Flixotide at the same time. Symbicort contains very, very strong Ventolin, Oxys and Pulmicort. So how can you take your preventer regularly and only take the reliever when you need it? You can't. People take these morning and night. And when they first go on this, people think, oh, this is great. You know, I don't need any Ventolin anymore. Little do they know that if they're taking 2 or 3 or 4 puffs of this, they're taking 10, 20, 30 or 40 puffs of Ventolin a day, the equivalent of that. And all the side effect and weakening their immune system at the same time. Now, people go on this, I haven't got too many asthma symptoms, but then people start to get more susceptible to colds and flu and pneumonia. People start to get these lung infections, fungal infections, aspergillosis, pseudomonas I see people with. They're on permanent antibiotics now for the rest of their life to try and get rid of that. Or asthmatics start to get a condition that an asthmatic never ever used to get. People who've got asthma never used to get this condition. It's called sleep apnea. Because now their asthma is so suppressed with all these strong drugs, the cause is still there and it's got worse, so their breathing's bad at night and they get sleep apnea. Asthmatics never used to get it because they used to wake up with asthma first when they breathe like this. If you're here to overcome your asthma, your sinus, hay fever, any of those conditions, I can help you by addressing the real cause. And the real cause is the way you've come to breathe. So what we do is to start to retrain the way you breathe. It takes 5 sessions over 5 days. It involves a number of breathing techniques, exercises to recondition your body's acceptance of more carbon dioxide so your body gets more oxygen. It's also some subtle lifestyle changes, and we teach you the correct way to take your drugs. You stay on your preventer medications and you only take your reliever medications as required. When you get a bit of an attack though, we teach you some breathing exercises to do, and if you don't need it, then you don't need to take it. And what people find is very quickly though, as they start to improve their breathing, their symptoms really reduce. It's common for people with asthma to reduce their symptoms by 90% in the first week. If you're on these drugs, we coach you how to go back to your doctor over the next couple of days or whatever and get a prescription, tell your doctor you're doing Buteyko, we'd like to be treated in the old-fashioned way, get a prescription just for the preventer medication and Ventolin or Bricanol, and very quickly we can start to improve this. You stay on your preventer until your breathing rate gets really, really, really good as we start to measure from the day Tuesday. And then when you've had no asthma for a month or more and your breathing measurements are really good, you can go back to your doctor and say, look, I haven't had any, how do I reduce my preventer further? And you halves it again and eventually you can come off everything. Like hundreds, thousands of people have done since the early 90s. Hay fever is just a similar form of this. As I said, it's triggered by a chemical that makes you over-breathe. You start to breathe more normal volume, use your nose more, filter out most of these allergens, end up with more carbon dioxide, more oxygen. You're still affected by these things, but they don't push you into the danger zone, and you just don't react. Now, so That's asthma. Let's talk a little bit about sleep, but before we do, there are 4 reasons why you should breathe through your nose, not just because I asked you to. The first reason is our nose is a fantastic filtration system. We have hairs and sinus passages designed to trap all the allergens and dirt and impurities that our lungs don't want. Our lungs like it sterile, because anything that hits your lungs gets straight into your bloodstream. So if it's going to react with anything, it's going to get in. Our nose is a fantastic filtration system. The second reason why we should breathe through our nose is our nose warms and humidifies the air. Our airways don't like being dried out. If they get dried out by excessive laughing, excessive barracking, excessive talking incorrectly, then the airways will dry out, your body will lubricate with mucus. If you keep talking and drying them out further, then you hear people start croaking up, okay? People who are trained in Buteyko breathing very quickly learn that when they speak, they should be able to breathe out through their mouth, because that's what speaking is, and breathe in and rebreathe the air in through their nose. Now, the other thing that happens when you dry out your airways is people get this very easily reactive, this chronic cough. You hear people who cough uncontrollably. It's a really shocking cough regularly sometimes some people do it every 10 minutes for years. Chronic cough through the dry airways. The third thing, that when we get a cold, our body produces mucus, reacts with enzymes in the walls of our nose to kill bacteria. And the final thing our nose does is, see, even my big honk compared to my even bigger mouth, it regulates the volume that we should be breathing. Okay? When we bypass our nose and breathe through our mouth, we bypass this fantastic filtration system. Mouth breathing is largely responsible for just about all ear, nose, throat and chest infections that people get, and certainly responsible for all the orthodontic problems that kids have. Now, I have several dentists around ringing me because they've got these new therapies with young kids, 8 years old, to try and shape their teeth so they can avoid having bands, and it just won't work if they're a mouth breather. My son no longer has hay fever, but I spent a fortune fixing his teeth, absolute fortune. He had to have operations to line it all up again, everything from his years and years and years of mouth breathing. Dentist in Townsville rings me up and says, "Thank God you're finally coming to Townsville," because I used to go to Cairns and Mackay. I'm a mandibular dentist, whatever it is. And he said, you know, all these kids I see, and it's all their mouth breathing, and nobody knows how to change the way they breathe, except you people.